Still troubled by childhood visits of imps. I've had a few strange things happen to me during my years, and I'll get around to writing about them eventually. But the first one I remember was the visit from two goblins. Now I know what you're going to say. Oh, you were only a kid, or you must have been semi-awake and still dreaming. But this has stayed with me for more than 50 years, and I can still see these creatures in my mind, as clear as when it first happened. I was about 5 or 6 years old at the time, and we lived in a Victorian terraced house, what we call here in England a 2 up 2 down, which is basically 2 bedrooms above 2 downstairs rooms, a front parlor for best and family visits, and the main living dining family room. The only addition was a single-story kitchen or wash house tacked onto the back, and the outside toilet privy was out back of that. There must have been, and probably still are, many thousands just like it up and down the country. Not at all spooky from what I remember. As we were both very young, my older by 5-year sister and I shared the back bedroom, with our parents having the front one. My bed was in the corner furthest from and parallel to the rear-facing window, with my sister's bed just the other side of our shared bedside table, and between that and the bedroom door. My habit was to sleep with my back to the wall, so I could see the whole room pretty much in one view. This just helps set the scene. On the night in question, I awoke to see what I still vividly remember as an imp, goblin, gargoyle-type figure clinging to the wall near the ceiling, near the chimney stack, and heading towards the diagonally far corner. As most kids would do, I pulled the bedclothes over my head and pretended to be asleep, while still unable to take my eyes off this thing through the tiny gap I'd left. He could have been no bigger than 10 inches tall, and moved in a jerky manner, like skitter, stop, look around, repeat, moving maybe a few inches in one movement, and seemed to have no difficulty supporting himself by clinging to the wallpaper with his claws. I remember thinking that it looked as if it were lit by moonlight from the window, but we had curtains that were always drawn closed at night. Grayish with sharply defined detail. Its skin was like one of those Sphinx cats, although I never knew they even existed at the time. Like stretched over its bones, smooth but supple and slightly baggy at the same time. It had no wings that I could see, and had big pointed ears, large eyebrows, and eyes. Just to say, we didn't go anywhere much beyond the end of the street at that age, apart from to school and back, along streets just like ours. So my known world was very small. I had very limited experience, and couldn't have conjured it up from a memory. It's only been as I got older that I've come to recognize the same things on church masonry and modern garden ornaments. As I got nearer to the window, and nearer to the corner, and then around onto the window wall, I then noticed a second creature near the other side of the window from the first. This too was jerking its head around shiftily, as if on lookout for anything coming. Now, our windows were the old-fashioned sash-type ones, which were 2-part and slid past each other in an up-down direction, with a rotary latch at the middle, which stopped either half from sliding up and down, as the two things met up on either side of the top frame, just under the curtain rail, and the curtains were open. The second one pushed down on the top section of the window with its rear leg foot and slid it down a few inches, wide enough for them to climb out. With one last scan over their shoulders at the room in general, they both climbed out and slid the window closed from the outside. Then, they both disappeared from view. I supposed up and over the guttering and onto the roof. I lay awake for a long time, for fear that they would come back, but must have dropped back to sleep eventually. The next morning, I debated whether to mention that what had happened to my parents, but chose to keep it to myself for fear of ridicule. I never thought to check the window catch, as I was way too small to reach that high on the window anyways, and was always warned about climbing on things and the dangers of falling off furniture, so I just got on with my kid's life and pushed it to the back of my mind, chalking it up to a bad dream. For many, many years, I've kept this to myself, but a couple years back, I was visiting my sister and recounted my experience during mutual reminiscence of our early childhood home, to finally unburden myself of the secret. When I finished, she just said, "Oh yes, them," with the emphasis on them. As if she knew about them, but that they were something that shouldn't be talked about. She wouldn't go into any further details about it, or answer the question that came into my head, and waved it away with a sudden change of subject. Whether or not she had seen the same thing that same night, or had had her own experiences with them, is still unclear. I certainly never saw them again after that night, and our parents moved us all to a newer home across the other side of the city soon after. What they were or why they were in our room that night, I will never know, but they were sneaking around for some reason. Perhaps my awakening put pay to their intentions and forced them to make a hasty exit. I do hope so. The experience. I'm so glad you posted this. Let me tell you that you are not the only one to have seen these things. I have only seen or read a handful of modern experiences with these little creatures. I really hope more people come forward. I lived in a very haunted home as a child, and both my sister and I saw what I've been calling gnomes or dwarves when retelling the events. They used to watch us while we slept, and they would peer into the room and giggle, whisper and quietly talk amongst themselves in a language that we could not understand, a language that included clicking noises. She and I never discussed seeing them at the time. However, 10 years later, during a discussion of our supernatural experiences, my sister almost turned white when I started to describe my experiences with them. When I tried to mimic the sounds they used to make, she almost broke into tears. She was so terrified. Your description of them is so close to what I saw. They usually came in a few at a time. They were all dressed uniquely. There seemed to be a leader, and I remember him the most. He had a large, long, bumpy nose, pointed ears, wrinkled and thick textured skin on his face, and a deep-set large eyes, as you described. His clothing was interesting, and reminds me of traditional German lederhosen. The most striking feature, though, was the hooved feet. He had human-typed hands, but hooved feet. They never came close to us, and remained at the door frame, and would just poke their heads around the frame of the door. They seemed to be stopped from entering for some reason. We saw them multiple times. This is an experience I do not share often, so since it is so different from the typical ghost experience, I think people just automatically assume it's your imagination. I might have believed that as well if my sister had not seen them also. She's a very honest person, and she would not try to lie to me about it. The expression on her face was so shocking when I first mentioned them, and it was so real to me. Anyways, I hope to hear more from other posters, since I would really like to read their physical descriptions of these creatures. I think they became myth in human culture, but they do actually exist. My theory is that they are interdimensional beings. I do not believe they are malicious. I always sensed that they were curious and mischievous, that's all. Although it was frightening, since we did not know what they were, but we were never threatened by them directly. The Three Amigos and the Gavel. This is my church experience. Hello there, everyone. Hope all is well. I decided to submit an experience of mine that I had in my younger years. The age I was at the time is a bit hazy to remember now, although I do know it's anywhere from, I'd say, 6 to 10 years old. Now to the actual meat of the post. It all started one Sunday night. The members of my church decided to do some type of interpretive dance, which I've never really saw before. In the first couple of minutes, I had to use the restroom, and by the time I came back, the dance was pretty much over. So I sat back down in my chair, and that's when they came. But of course, not without grand entrance. No, I assure you that all my eyes were treated with the delight of seeing the very walls and some sections of the floor burst into a flickering wet blackness. As if my eyes were a camera lens, I, not sure how, immediately saw and sensed them. Stout, slender, black. A blackness that covered their entire bodies except their faces. They had 4 claws instead of the 5 fingers we humans have. 3 claws on their feet. The most intriguing part about them was their face. I will never forget that. A thin, oval-like white mask. I say mask because it looked like one. Engraved vertical slashes from the edge of their chin up to where the human's upper lip is. Their eyes were honestly creepy in lack of a better term. They surprisingly had a white sclera, albeit extremely bloodshot. The shape of their eyes were no friendly, little almond-shaped, but a perfect circle that was lined with what looked to be blood. Their very irises and pupils were an interchanging, rippling amalgamation of dread, black as the void and redder than any sample of fresh blood you see in a hospital. There, I sat in my little chair watching these creatures. The speed was inhuman. They darted around the room like monkeys, jumping over chairs, throwing themselves across the rooms, teasing unsuspecting people who for some reason could not see them. Clawed hands inches from their faces, eyes burning with a gleeful, maniacal hatred. Not 1, oh no, but 3. I was so lucky one could say that I had 3 of these demons, shadow imps in my presence. And then he showed up. An angel. Crazy. I know right away that this guy, oh boy, this guy. An actual golden light radiated from his very body. There he was, hovering. I would say he was Caucasian in skin color, if not with a golden tint to him. Adored in a white robe, with a sky blue sash along his torso. His hair, I'd say, was blonde, if not for again with like his skin, a golden tint to it. His eyes, my gosh, his eyes. The entirety of it, pupil, iris, sclera, is all which flicks of a flame so deeply royal blue emanated from. He raised both arms, and with that the demons took notice. They looked at him in shock, and then to one another in an oh shit moment. And then they did it again. This time, eyes practically bulging, oh shit. And then, the demons erupted into a wispy shadow residue, having been annihilated by the angel. With that, the room returned back to normal, and I no longer saw any supernatural entities in that moment. And I forgot everything that night. This one scene, as if like a book brought to life, still plays in the back of my mind, and that's it. There's my story. Hope you all like it. If you want to hear more, I'd be glad to tell. Hope you all have a wonderful morning, afternoon, night. God bless.